Hi, everyone. I have finally finished all of the information for the behavior plan. So I wanted to record another video to go through the behavioral aspects of things. And I'm hoping this one is much shorter video than the last one. This one's not as involved as the IEP ETR process. So I'm just going to go through a sample that I created. And again, these are documents that are available from the OD website. And so they're not as easy to use, and they don't have all of the features that you would have if you had the actual IEP software. So in some places, I may not have exactly what you would see in a district. And we may have some things that are done a little bit differently because of formatting issues. So here we are working with Iris O'Malley, and we are having her meeting on 3/17/23. So St. Patrick's Day is coming up on Friday. We're going to have the meeting that day. And if you notice, the date of implementation then is the Monday following that. Whenever you have a behavior plan, you want to give yourself a few days after the meeting before the official date of implementation, typically, because you will have a lot of people that you need to get information to. So we want to make sure that you're giving yourself some time to make sure everyone involved with the student knows what's happening before we have an official plan, just so that you don't have something that, say, it starts tomorrow and a teacher might be out, and then something happens when they come back before you've gotten a chance to talk to them, where we would then be in violation of the plan. So the first thing we're going to look at here is just the functional behavior assessment plan. And some of you are in a course with me right now where you are doing a behavioral field placement, and the FBA is a required element. So if we are looking in the behavior analysis world specifically, an FBA would be much, much more robust and detailed than what we are looking at here. But for an IEP behavior plan, this is what we would need to do. The forms walk you through it pretty well, I think, but there are just a few things that I definitely want to clarify. So the first thing that we look at is a behavior of concern. And we want to make sure this is observable and measurable. So meaning I can see the behavior, you would be able to see it independently, and it's something that you could take data on. So we're seeing the same thing. The one thing that we really have to avoid with behavior is saying the student seems to get upset with peers when they say certain things, or the student thinks everyone is out to get them. When we discuss behavior, it absolutely has to be something that everybody else can see as well. And so the big caveat there is when we're writing goals, it is tempting to write that you will refrain from a behavior. I cannot see or measure the amount of times a student doesn't swear at me when they want to. Okay. I can't get into their heads, and I can't ask them to, write down every time you really want to throw a pencil across the room, but you refrain from doing so. So we have to look at things that others can see and observe and measure. So in this consideration here, we are looking at, I have Marcia, and I think I messed up there because I had her for my previous students. Let me change this really quick. So Iris's behavior of concern is what we're calling destruction of property. This is defined as any of the following: crumpling paper, which usually it's tests or assignments, but also could be classroom materials such as posters or bulletin board materials, into paper balls and throwing them across the room or onto the floor. Using some type of writing utensil, pen, pencil, could be marker, could be chalk, could be whiteboard marker, in a fist grip to scribble or make lines with such force that the action tears the paper and or mars the surface under the paper, and shredding or tearing papers into small pieces that are tossed onto the floor and or desk. So all of these different typographies, the typography is what the behavior looks like, are all encompassed under the umbrella of destruction of property. Triggering the event. This is something that usually happens when she's frustrated about an assignment. Maybe she's upset about something someone has said to her, or when she comes into school already upset about something that has happened home, on the bus, or even in the hallway before entering the classroom. The setting where the behavior likely occurs, we're looking at time of day, physical settings, and people involved. So these are antecedents here. It occurs throughout the day, across all classes, and with almost all teachers and staff. Sometimes when we do those ABC charts, which is the antecedent, behavior, consequent, we find that behaviors occur just with certain teachers, just in certain class periods, just when a certain peer is present. So in this case, we're looking at this and saying, nope, not there. How often and how long? This is what we would refer to as latency in behavioral terms. So how long does it take between the request to stop and the student's actual response to that? So once Iris begins these behaviors, she does not stop immediately when told. It usually takes approximately 45 to 60 seconds to stop. Now, if you think about that, 45 to 60 seconds doesn't seem like a long time, but if she is destroying classroom materials, if she's pulling things off the wall, if she's grabbing papers from other students, if she's crumpling up all of your copies of your test and quiz, and it takes 45 to 60 seconds to stop, a lot of destruction can happen in that time. Iris is getting more upset. She tends to escalate, I'm sure, during this time, and then other students would be involved. So who does the student react negatively to, and who is she likely to listen to here? So Iris responds better to adults. When peers attempt to intervene, it usually causes the behavior to worsen. And then what is the adult's vocal response? So typically we would say something like, Iris, please calm down, or I need you to stop shredding the paper. Please stop shredding that paper right now. And then what are some of the consequences? So she's had some detention after school. She's had some in-school detention as a result of repeated incidences of destroying classroom materials. And then when she calms down, she has to complete those assignments. So she is not completely able to avoid the assignment. If something's frustrating, we still go back to it. So then we look at the function or purpose of the behavior. And in behavior analysis, we have 4 functions. So one is escape or avoidance. One is access to tangibles. So there's some item or activity that the student is trying to get. One is called automatic reinforcement or self-stimulatory behavior, in which they are stimming, typically is what we would call. So all of those sensory types of things, scratching an itch, picking at skin. I've had students who pick open scabs repeatedly. That's an automatic reinforcer. Okay, and the final function of behavior there is attention-seeking behavior. So attempting to get someone's attention, to make people laugh, to have someone talk to her, those types of things. So what we would look at here, in order to get this information, you would have probably done that ABC chart where you look at the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So the behavior, you look at what happened that's maladaptive, that's a negative behavior, something that we don't want to continue to happen. And then the antecedent is what happened right before it that triggers the behavior. And then the consequence is what happened as a result of the behavior. So how did peers react? How did teachers react? And then how did Iris respond to those things? And from collecting that ABC data over a period of days or a few periods of time or something, we would take that and put that information here. So some additional things, what are some of the things that we've tried? Maybe we've tried a token economy for completing assignments. So we're trying to ignore the destruction behavior and reinforce appropriate behavior. And then primary mode of communication here is spoken and written English. A lot of times when we do an FBA, we are doing these with students who are either nonverbal or have very limited verbal ability, and that lack of communication really is the factor for why the behavior is happening. They're trying to communicate. So how the student communicates is super important in this process. And then some other relevant information here. Iris has a specific learning disability in reading and math. Her reading level is approximately 7.9, which is the end of 7th grade, and she is in 10th grade at this point, so we're a little bit below grade level. IQ designated from her ETR at 98, which is only 2 points below what we would consider average. So this would tell us here there are not any other major disability issues happening here. We have something happening with her specific behavior. So then from that, we would create a behavior intervention plan here. So a couple of things can happen. We can do a formal behavior intervention plan such as this. Sometimes if the behavior is not as severe, we work it through just as a behavior goal on an IEP. So where you would have your math and reading goals and some of your adaptive behavior, executive functioning, you could have a behavior goal there as well. So in this case, we are looking at what were some of the information sources we got from the FBA, so formal and informal. We would have looked at classroom documentation from teachers, so I'm sure administrators in this case would have asked them to document anytime Iris destroys property. Definitely if she has had consequences such as detention and in-school suspensions for this, there would be documentation about the behavior. We would look at those principles, behavioral disciplinary action reports. We should definitely have some ABC charts and some other narrative data from an observation. Observations can be completed by your school psychologist, the psychology assistant. Your building principals could do those. In a lot of cases, the intervention specialist does those. Either if they're working with the student or you've got a student you haven't worked with, you might have an IS that's not as familiar with the student come in and take some objective data. Looking at a strengths-based profile, then we want to see what does Iris do well? What does she manage on her own? What can she do independently so that we can use some of those things to create replacement behaviors? So she's usually an outgoing student. She does well with peers and adults, typically interacts with other students in generally positive ways, and she does try hard, typically with academic tasks. Even though she's reading below grade level, she usually is able to master those grade level lesson objectives. Then our summary statement here, we are looking at the specific problem behavior and creating a hypothesis or summary sheet about those specific behaviors. So we have deduced from our examinations that her behavior is escape or avoidance maintained. That's the function. Iris displays these behaviors when she does not want to do an academic task that is given to her. She often displays escape avoidance behavior when something else has upset her, or when she is not expecting a long or difficult assignment to be given to her. So then we're looking at some strategies and outcomes. This is a worksheet. So here's where we're kind of spitballing and putting together some ideas about what are some things we could do here that would reduce this negative behavior. So setting event strategies, these are environmental factors. So what could we do to change the environment to help her out a little bit? So we could give her that little break when she comes into class. Remember that a lot of times she gets upset by things that happen at home before school or on the bus or in the hallway before class. So when she comes in, we give her a break. We've got a 2-minute break. Let her put her head down, listen to music, whatever you decide to do or whatever is allowable per your district policies, to redirect her thoughts toward her subject, get her mind off of what just happened. Provide lots of verbal reinforcement when she does start an activity or assignment without getting unduly frustrated. So lots of great praise for thanks for getting started, awesome job today, way to get into the activity, those types of things. Antecedent strategies are those things that we put in place prior to decrease the likelihood of the behavior occurring at all. So if she does not like surprise assignments, she doesn't like not knowing what's coming, putting that daily agenda on the board, letting her know what's coming, what's expected for the day, and then also putting a calendar overview of upcoming assignments, particularly that are long or difficult. When I was a high school teacher, I used to have 2 giant whiteboard monthly calendars up, and I would keep a 2-month view at all times. So we're at the end of March now, so I guess we're mid-March. So I would have had March and April. And if we've got a long paper due in April, say it's due April 15th, I'm gonna put research paper due on that, and everything was color coded by subject. And then we would break it down, intro research project, so that students could see, whoo, I've got a 3-page paper coming up in a month, but we're going to work on it one part at a time so that they're not as overwhelmed. And that's really a strategy that helps a lot of kids, whether it's something escape avoidance based, anxiety, definitely, those types of things. And a lot of your students who are procrastinators, if you do that natural chunking, really helps out a lot of your students. For Iris here then, some behavioral teaching strategies. So alternate behaviors. What do we want her to do instead of destroying things? So we could teach a lot of calming strategies, teach her to take some deep breaths when she becomes frustrated, rather than, clenching a pencil, grabbing things, balling things up. If you think about what her behaviors are, a lot of it involves making a fist. So if you're crumpling paper, your hands are active as a fist. If she's grabbing a full fist grip on the pen when she's drawing through things, she's tearing paper. So teaching her to clench her fists instead. You could use stress balls. She tends to throw things as part of this behavior. So just be advised that a stress ball is a projectile for a lot of students. So I don't know if you want to try that one, teaching her to clench her fists, just maybe clench around a pen or pencil. There are even like hair rollers, like for curling your hair, that almost look like miniature pool noodles. So those are spongy. You could have her squeeze one of those. Any other types of behavior that might be calming, that might be something that's related to what she's doing, but that would be more appropriate. And then reinforcement strategies here. So what is the consequence? And in reinforcement, keep in mind, reinforcement should cause the behavior to be more likely to occur in the future. If the behavior is not more likely to occur in the future, it is not actually reinforcement. So what we want to look at is something that's going to increase the likelihood of those replacement or alternative behaviors that we want to teach instead. So differential reinforcement of alternate behavior, or DRA, is when we would specifically verbally reinforce any behavior that is appropriate and is an alternative to the destruction of property. Okay, so looking at alternative behaviors listed above, clenching your fist, taking a breath, anything that is an alternate to destruction of property, we are reinforcing. Then we work into our action plan here. So in our goal statement, we're working through the process here. So the intervention and skills here, it doesn't really tell us much about it specifically what it wants here. So what we want her to do is use a calming strategy to remain calm rather than destroying property. Should be implemented by anyone, any adult staff member who works with her. And then we're going to start this for 9 weeks. So we're looking at one final grading period left in the school year here. Checklist, just a basic checklist. Times she becomes frustrated. And then did she use appropriate or inappropriate strategies? So we can mark a little box, frustrated. It was appropriate this time, or it was inappropriate this time. And then that data should be collected, ideally, again, by any of those adults who work with her. So general educators, intervention specialists, paraprofessionals, anyone who comes in contact with her. Typically, if you have a situation where if there's an incident in a cafeteria or maybe a study hall that's run by a paraprofessional, they may not collect data for you, but as long as they tell you it has happened, you can record that with your data. Monitoring, in this case, we have an intervention specialist designated as the person who monitors the implementation. It does not have to be the IS, could be anyone else involved as well. And then the review schedule, each grading period, we're going to review tracking data to determine if anything needs to be made as a change. In this case, this behavior is not something that is so severe that she or others are being harmed. It doesn't seem to be something that's and happening so frequently that we need to address it more often. So if we review it when we do our normal progress reports, that should be okay. Now, if we have a behavior plan, we also want to have a crisis intervention plan in place. A lot of times for districts to do this formal level of a behavior plan versus just a behavior goal, this would be something that is happening super frequently or something that involves dangerous behaviors that we need to have this crisis plan in place. If Iris's behavior is only happening maybe 2 or 3 times a quarter, and it's not severe and nobody's really being injured, we could really look at this more as just a behavior goal on an IEP, and not so much. But if this is something that she's doing this, maybe once or twice a week or something, and we really need to look at this more carefully, we would have a crisis plan. So here we have, if she escalates and begins throwing those bulletin board items, especially think about thumbtacks and staples are on a bulletin board. If she's targeting those at other students, she'll be asked to leave the room. If she does not comply within 30 seconds, the other students will be removed from the room. We try not to do room clears anymore because it's super disruptive to the learning of others and everyone down the hallway. But if this is a situation where people are being injured and she's throwing bulletin board items, obviously when she starts to throw things, other students should be moved away from her, at least to another part of the room. But if we can't get her to leave the room, then we want to make sure that everybody is safe. So continuing progress monitoring method. The IS is tracking the total number of times that she escalates to this level. If this happens more than once in a month, the team will need to reconvene to revise this behavior plan. So the person responsible here is the IS. Again, it does not always have to be the IS. Okay, not everything needs to fall to the IS. You might have other people in place who can monitor this, maybe administratively, especially at a high school setting where the IS wouldn't be with her all day. There's not one teacher who travels with her. This may be something that's run through the counseling office or through the administrative office. Criterion for success: if we do not see this behavior at all during the last 3 months of school or at all during the first quarter of next year, we can discontinue the plan, okay, until or unless something happens again. So then our follow-up meeting would be at the end of the first quarter of next school year. And then newest wording. So if this is a change, this is something that's happening, we need to make sure that all teachers and support staff are notified of the plan and provided with descriptions of some sample language to use with Iris. So what should we say to her when this happens? There may be certain words that trigger her more, that escalate the situation, versus certain words or tones that might help her calm down. Communicating the behavior plan. I did not include everyone. I didn't add extra lines or try to put everyone here, but just note it that everyone who comes in contact with her, we got to think about those classroom teachers. We also need to think about phys ed, art, music, cafeteria, whoever monitors the cafeteria. Everyone needs to be made aware of what's happening. The date and frequency, I put in the first date, and I did put some nice detailed information about how often and how long. And then with this form, it made it go away when I clicked to the next tab. So you would have here, every 9 weeks, we review this. And if any changes are made, we notify everyone that either we are continuing with the plan as is or that we have made changes. And then the last thing I have for you on this one is a manifestation determination. So this is something that would occur that if there's a major issue and we're looking at either a long-term suspension or an expulsion as a possibility, or once a student with an IEP has been suspended for 10 days or more. So if you are looking at once we hit that 10-day mark with out of school suspension for a student with an IEP, if we continue to do any type of out of school suspensions or looking at expulsions or alternative schools, that would constitute a change of placement. So we would need to look at a manifestation determination to determine if the behavior that is causing the school removal is a manifestation of the child's disability. So what I'm showing you here is the manifestation determination worksheet. This is typically not completed by the intervention specialist in most districts. Most districts that I have worked with, this is done by a combination of your special education director and your building administrators. So technically, legally, I believe, you should have a meeting with the student's parents, administrative, superintendent, typically your special services director, your building principals, and an intervention specialist, and possibly some classroom teachers. I will let you know, I have absolutely been in district situations where teachers are not included in these meetings. Typically, the administrator would ask me for a statement, and they would want a written statement of, what do you know about the student? What is typical behavior? How does she respond for you? And then they take that information to the manifestation meeting. You should be, if you are the student's IS especially, you should be at that meeting. You should be invited to that meeting. There have been times when I have asked if I should be there, or don't you think I should be there? And I've kind of been told no. And then there are situations where I have formally requested in writing to be involved in the meeting. And then when I do that, I have been invited to the meeting. So if this is a situation where this is a student you work with and you really want to make sure you are being heard, you may need to put that in writing with your district. Check with your veteran teachers there. Again, that varies by who your administrators are at the time and who's in the district. So please make sure you check. Okay, so in this case, we are looking at what was the behavior that we're looking at here. And again, everything needs to be in observable and measurable terms. So on August 24th, sorry, before I jump into that, note that I have the date of meeting as 9/27/2023. So we're saying that we have this FBA and we have this behavior plan in place, and then next school year, Iris comes back and we start seeing some issues. So right after school starts, the 24th would be very close to the beginning of school. She became upset over an assignment and began to tear at a bulletin board. This resulted in the contents of the board, including those staples and thumbtacks, to fly through the air and hit some peers. She was suspended out of school for 1 day. Then on September 1st, she became upset again over a comment that was made by a peer and threw the items in her locker across the hallway, hitting a peer in the face with a book. She was then suspended out of school for 3 days for this. So now we are at 4 days of out of school suspension. And then on September 24th, she became upset at the comment of a peer and pulled a hand dryer off the wall in the bathroom. She was suspended for 10 days out of school for this. So we are now at that, we are past 10 days here total. So in this case, we don't know if the superintendent has requested an expulsion hearing. Most often we do the manifestation in a situation where we are looking at expulsion, or this could be an ongoing situation. So by September 24th, we have had 3 pretty major instances of disruptive, destructive behavior with injury or possible injury to peers, and some serious injury of pulling a hand dryer off the wall in the bathroom is pretty serious here. So something is happening repeatedly, consistently. Before the end of the 9 weeks is even up, we've got 3 major instances here. So we need to look at what is happening here with this student. So then we're looking at the nature of the disability. Iris has displayed negative frustration-related behaviors in the form of destroying property 6 times during the previous school year, and now 3 times in the first few weeks of this year. So we really need to consider it happened, the property destruction of some level happened 6 times total for a school year. And here we are in September, and we've already got 3 pretty major instances. She has been diagnosed with OHI, which is other health impairment due to ADHD. Evaluation diagnostic results. She displays frustration-related behavior that is destructive and sometimes aggressive in nature. She does not have a diagnosed emotional or behavioral disorder, and her behavior has been the result of academic frustration triggered by a social event that typically upsets her. Okay, so these are the things that we've seen in the past. Her last ETR, which is where this information would have come from, was in February of 2021. So it is current. It is less than 3 years old. And do those diagnostic results address the current areas of concern? Yes, behavior has been an ongoing thing. This is something that's happened consistently with her. And now we're looking at how it impacts, how the disability that she has impacts progress. So her specific learning disability, or her OHI ADHD, excuse me, impacts her. She is reading below grade level, but has been able to maintain consistent progress and mastery of grade level standards and objectives. She does get frustrated with those long, difficult, or unexpected assignments. Social skills wise, this frustration typically occurs after some type of negative interaction with someone else, when she's already upset and then is presented with a difficult academic task. Self-care, domestic or community skills. She has grade and age level appropriate hygiene, self-care, and community level skills. She is able, in other words, to express herself with words when she is upset. Receptive and expressive language are appropriate for her age. And again, what we're looking at here in these areas is, does the student have a disability that is significant enough that it impairs their ability to appropriately communicate their feelings, to let others know, or to understand directions that are given to them? Relevant parent information. Iris's parents tell us that she really doesn't display these behaviors at home, and she often tells her parents that she hates school and that it's either too hard or it's boring. Something we typically hear from high school students in general. Sources of information, we did a parent phone call to get this, and then a review of her records. And then in this case, Iris was observed in multiple classrooms over a 4-day span. On one occasion, she was given a writing assignment to which she replied, "I hate this," and wrote her name on the paper with enough force to break the pencil, but otherwise did not display any negative or inappropriate behavior during observations. So typically these are observations that are coming from ETR assessments or your other behavior assessments that you've done. Once this manifestation is happening, in most cases, the child is under suspension. So as the 10-day window closes there, you have to have this meeting within that time before you can continue to suspend the student out of school. So she would not be in school to observe what's happening right now. We would look at what has already happened. What do we already have on file? So we've got some classroom observations by the building principal and some notes from the classroom teachers that provided us with that. Iris has a behavior goal on her IEP. So in this case, we're saying Iris's goal is that she will use a calming strategy in 4 of 5 situations in which she becomes frustrated. So if we think back to that checklist that we had for monitoring this, you're noting each time that she becomes frustrated that you can visually observe. You can tell by her face, you can tell by her actions that she is becoming frustrated, and then we would know she's frustrated because she's either going to use an appropriate calming strategy that we have taught her, or she is going to use an inappropriate behavior, which is one of those destruction of property things. And her IEP was done last March, so the IEP, yes, is current. And what is her placement? So Iris is currently in all general education classes with the support of an intervention specialist for those 4 main content areas. So if there is any change of placement within 10 days, so again, an out-of-school suspension is considered change of placement. So we cannot have an interim alternative educational setting, i.e. out-of-school suspension, in-school detention, any of those things that would take her out of that inclusive environment with support for those types of things without going through this process. So there are some things here, some caveats, all of those things the legality issues, those things really fall on the administrators. It's absolutely good for you to know those things and know that the differences in, when there's a weapon involved, when there are illegal drugs happening, some of those things can change how this happens and what we do with those situations. This manifestation process is something that is really administrator driven. Administrator determinations are happening there. And I, again, have not put on here anything that says whether this is determined to be a manifestation of her disability or not, because this is something that absolutely needs to be determined at that meeting. So you are providing evidence, you are talking out some of those types of things. It's a tough situation. She has an OHI for ADHD, and she has had some very impulsive behaviors here. So we could argue in one respect that, she does have impulsivity, diagnosed impulsive behavior disorder here. So we could say, well, is this a manifestation of that? Well, it could be, yes, because she is impulsive and she's acting impulsively. In some respects, you could look at this then and say, this has happened infrequently. It's usually been crumpling paper. There's a big difference between crumpling paper and throwing it on the floor, and scribbling through a notebook, and ripping a poster off of a bulletin board, and throwing books across the hallway, and then definitely ripping that hand dryer off of the wall in the bathroom is not quite the same as crumpling paper and throwing it on the floor. So something's happening. We have an escalation here. So one avenue, we could say, we need to look at other factors. What could be happening with her that might be causing this behavior to escalate? Is it something related to academic gaps? Are there social concerns? Are there issues with peers that she's having? One thing we could look at is, is the ETR correct? Is her diagnosis designation area sufficient? Is this just OHI and ADHD, or is there something that has moved into an emotional or behavioral disorder realm? Another thing you would definitely discuss with parents here is, are there any medication issues, medication changes? Has she been on medications for ADHD that she stopped taking? They've been discontinued. You've switched dosage, you've switched to medication. Also, there can be some things with, any types of medications like that when we're talking about puberty and getting older, and changes in the body can cause changes to how it reacts to the medication. So any of those types of things that would come into play would be discussed at the meeting. And then the team works together to make a determination of whether it is a manifestation of the disability or not. And then from there, what are the next steps in terms of suspension, expulsion? And keep in mind that expulsion with a student on an IEP is not a permanent scenario. So especially if we're looking at September here with her, even if we determine something that is a temporary expulsion, that's something that we need to review and look at. And do we bring the student back in another, several weeks or however long? So that is just an overview of what we do here. Side note, if we are doing a behavior goal on an IEP, it would need to be progress monitored the way that we would do another goal. So you would need to have those data points, and it would show up on that same form. With this, if we have that meeting every 9 weeks, we would also have some data collection and an update type of thing, and the parents would be involved in that as well. All right, thanks for listening.